What's up, everybody? This is part one of a series of videos looking at the best camera in the world. Today, we're looking through the menu system of the Alexa Mini LF. By the end of the video, you'll know how to operate any Alexa fully from a menu standpoint. And this week, we'll look more at all the details of the camera. We'll look at the footage. We'll talk about the financial aspects, why it's an amazing investment, how to expose properly, the exposure index, rigging up the camera, different ways to set it up, putting it on a Movi, just overall everything I've experienced with the camera over the past 2 years. If there's anything you want me to cover, let me know. I'll be working on these videos for like the next week or two and really want to cover everything. Yeah, so let me know. So now let's jump into the menu. Okay, so this is what you see when you turn on the camera. We're going to go through all the menus, operate the viewfinder, and check the information that's on the monitor here. This is a Mini LF, but it applies to all of the other Alexas. So first things first, this is the main tool that you'll use to control the camera, and this is kind of the home screen. In the middle of the screen, we have standby, which lets you know that you're ready to record. If I were to pull the mag out, we would see nothing there. Media is how much time you have left on the media. Record is what codec you're recording in, and the look that you're viewing on the monitor is Arri 709, which is all changeable. Again, up here, Arri RAW, our resolution, 4.5K LF, the open gate, and the actual resolution that is being recorded. Then we have the voltage from the battery, which I am plugged into the wall, so we're getting 24 volts. Over here is an indication that the internal mics are recording. And this icon right here is to signify that the Wi-Fi is turned on, so I can access this exact menu setup from a computer or a phone. Then we have our real clip and duration. This actually shows what our last clip was. So we're on A1, and the last clip was clip 38, and it was 30 seconds long. So if I were to roll again, we are rolling on clip 39. So this will show your last clip. And the USB here is to indicate that the USB stick is in the camera, which lets you put in custom frame lines, different looks, and user setups, which we'll get into in a minute. You can also see this information displayed differently over here. Any of the items up here or down here are clickable with the buttons that are on the monitor. So if you want to change your frame rate, you just click the button above frame rate, and you can cycle through and select your frame rate. You can add a frame rate, so you can type in a custom frame rate, and anytime that you're in a window like this where there are numbers, you can click and toggle between typing and scrolling. So I can scroll here or click here to type in the numbers. So I'm going to keep us where we were. Timecode, you can go in and reset the timecode, which goes to 0. And anytime the camera's off for like 10 or 15 minutes or so, that will reset to 0. I like to set it to time of day, unless there's time code coming into the camera, in which case it will be synced with everything else. Mode is where you can select additional settings and have time code coming into the camera. And there's another place in the menu that we'll get into in a minute that can also do that. I am operating a jog wheel behind the viewfinder, and there's a select button. And also there is another wheel here and a button. So when the monitor of the viewfinder is out, this typically gets operated often instead of the one back here. So up here is your shutter, and again, you can scroll or add. Your exposure index goes from 160 to 3200. I'm gonna put this back at 800. ND, clear, 0.6, 1.2, and 1.8. You can hit set here, but I am also just hitting select back here. White balance. You can scroll what's in here. When the camera's been reset and you turn it on for the first time, there will be preset white balances in here. Some of what you see here are things that I've put in. You can auto white balance, and if you check the monitor, it puts up a square, and you hit auto white balance again, and it will white balance for whatever is in that square. And one other thing that you can do in white balance is add your own. I'm going to scroll to 4200, and when you click set, your tint will come up, and you can select what tint you want, and let's just pick minus 1.6 and set to apply it. There's two buttons on the side over here. This top button will toggle between your feed and your main screen, and the bottom button will take you deeper into the menu, which is the best laid out menu in a camera ever. Seriously, it's all in order of kind of how often you will go to those settings. So recording is first. Codec. There's 4 codecs here, 3 flavors of ProRes and Arri RAW. Let's go to 422HQ. This pops up, which is nice because I now know that the maximum frames per second that I can get in the resolution that I'm recording and the codec that I'm recording is 40 frames a second. So we'll hit confirm on there. Come down to recording resolution. We are in OpenGate, which records the full sensor. There's a bunch of options in here. If you want to use the full sensor but have a 16:9 image, this uses a lot of the sensor. You can see 4320 instead of 4448, so it's very close, and it downscales it to UHD, so makes the file size smaller. You can roll for longer, and it's super valuable to have this because it's just a 16:9 file where you're not using all the data of OpenGate. So we are in OpenGate right now, and if you look over at the monitor, we have 43 minutes left on this card. I have rolled a bunch on this card, so that's not the max capacity of one of these cards, but we'll go down to 4.3K UHD. The max frame rate has increased to 48. And our duration left on the card is 1 hour and 13. So if you know you're going to 16:9 and you want 4K, this is a good way to save some space. Project settings, project rate, you have the standard options here. Reel count, if I was starting a new project, I would set this to 1, so you can set what the next reel count will be. And if I were to format this card, it would go to a 001 if I had selected 1 here. Camera index, A cam, B cam, you can select, A through Z. Camera index color will show the A on the SDI feed as white. So you can select your different cameras and it will show like B cam in red, C cam in green, whatever you want. Camera ID prefix is the last 4 digits of the file name start with R. This camera specifically is RORB. It's really nice for knowing which camera is which. Each camera will have a separate last 4 digits ID. Lens squeeze factor, this is your anamorphic squeeze. We can see, I'll just put it on 2. And we are using a 16:9 part of the sensor, so it's going to be super thin here. But yeah, that will de-squeeze it on all of the monitors. Put it back. Beeper tally makes a beep when you hit record or stop record or the media is full, and the tally on the MVF will put a red light up here. Audio recording, you can put a feed into the camera. I have it turned on so that I can have internal mics on just for a scratch track. You could set your headphone volume and put a test tone here. You will not see any levels on the meters with the internal mics. I kind of wish you could, but you will only see levels if you have a line going in. So going down to media, this one's pretty easy. This is just where you format the card. It requires 2 buttons. I'm not going to format this, but you could also format the USB. So there's a USB stick in this camera, which is signified by this icon up here. That stores any frame lines or user setups or looks that you want to save or that you want to put in the camera. When you click prepare USB medium, that will just format it and create the proper folder structure on it. Monitoring, this is a big one that I'm in oftentimes. We'll start with EVF monitor. This is your settings for the monitor here and the viewfinder here. Frame border basically just puts a line around your frame that you're recording. Magnification zooms it in, and we'll see this a little bit better when we go to the monitor settings. I don't really use peaking on this, but you can select your peaking settings here. You can select your brightness. EVF power auto means that when you plug it into the camera, it will turn on. EVF eyepiece heating, which is kind of a dope feature. I kind of like joke around and tell people when they ask about this camera, I'm like, yeah, the eyepiece is even heated, but it's not a comfort thing. When the temperature outside is below a certain temperature, the eyepiece will turn on the heater so that it won't get fogged when you put your eye up to it, which is great. You can rotate it 180 degrees and you can adjust the brightness. This is just the brightness of this monitor right here. Any time it's talking about EVF, it's talking about what you look through with your eye. And when it says monitor, it's talking about the monitor on the viewfinder. This monitor will always be referred to as SDI. Monitor flip mode is set to auto so that if this goes upside down, it will flip it. EVF overlays. This is all the same settings in the SDI settings, so I'll show you those instead because we can't see this one right now because we're in the menu. In the eyepiece, you see exactly what you see on this monitor. So you can turn off any of the information that you don't want to see. So let's just move to SDI so we can actually see all of this. So we'll start with the top, SDI processing, frame border. You can see that turning off and on. You want to record in OpenGate, but your main delivery is for 2:3:9:1, and you're using spherical lenses. That's what we're set up for right here. But you want to see as much of your frame here as you can. So that's where magnification comes into play. For something like this, I'm going to turn off frame border because all I'm interested in is the frame line. And I'm going to magnify this, which will be 124%, just because I do this all the time. But I'm going to magnify this until the frame line meets the edge of the screen so I can see it better. And I don't like seeing outside of the frame lines. So we could go to overlays, frame line shading, 100%. And this icon right here will indicate that you are looking at a magnified section of what you are recording. Exposure tool is rarely ever set from this menu. I have it set to a button right here, which we'll get into again in a minute, but it just turns on your false colors. Peaking, we already talked about that. Overlays, you turn the frame lines off and on, and almost anything in here you can set to a button, and there's some buttons on here that you could set them to. Status info, overlays them across, like over top of the image, so it allows you to see even more of it. But there's also off, and safe is just the way to go. It's so small anyways, just safe is really what I see everybody doing and what I do. Again, status components, if I want info 1 off, info 2 off, and you can kind of just pick what you want. So this is the camera index, which you can see is a white A, as we discussed before. I love the electronic horizon. It's super nice for setting up shots. I turn this on, and by default, it shows as this, which is basically like a bubble level, but I like the numerical values. But I see the bubble level often for Steadicam. Your SDI image processed means, we'll switch it to clean real quick. It's just the raw image with none of the settings. Usually keep it at processed. If you're using both SDIs, I have this set to clone right now, but if you're using both and you want different settings for each, you just uncheck this. SDI 1 could have the look or just the classic Arri 709 look. SDI 2 could have like a creative LUT if somebody wanted to see that. So you can kind of split what the images look like from the two SDIs. I'm going to set that back to clone, go back, master magnification, basically just takes over and magnifies this, this, and this. So you can see right when I go here, it backs it back out. Now they're all linked together, and I'm looking at the same image in everything. Frame lines, I previously set this to 239, but there's a lot in here, and you can add anything that you want. A lot of what's in here I've added. If you want to add, you can just click add here, and what it's adding from is the USB stick that's in the camera, and you can create the frame lines in the frame line generator tool on Arri's site. So we'll keep that at 239. Your color, intensity, and user rectangles is much easier to make on the computer. Basically, if you want additional frame lines or like a dotted line on the side or another frame line for a different aspect ratio within this frame line. But making that on the computer is much easier. Okay, exposure tools. This is where you will set if you want to look at a false color or a zebra. I have it set to false color, and I have it set to this button. I will show you how to assign things to these buttons in a minute. My false color is monitoring based, meaning it's based on the Rec 709 image, because that's what we're looking at on here. But you can also select it to log C based, which will be a little bit different. It doesn't look too different when you're at an 800 ISO though. I like to keep it at monitoring based because I have this button set to log C, so I can check the log C. So when I have the exposure tool, which is false color, on, I can see the log C and the Rec 709. So I keep that at monitoring base so I can see both. If it was just log C, you could only see log C. Also, there's an exposure button on top of here, which will show the exposure tool on the EVF. The other option here, and I'll do this in SDI so we can see it, is zebra. And I have my zebra set to show if we're clipping. So I'll turn on the zebra. And this is useful, I think, when you're outside and it's kind of partly cloudy and the sun keeps peeking out behind the clouds and the exposure is always changing. Leaving your zebras on is nice because it's kind of hard to work just looking at false colors, but having the zebras on all the time will not interrupt you until they should interrupt you when you're clipping where you don't want to be clipping. You can also set a mid-level zebra for, let's say, where you want your skin tone to land, and you can toggle on and off your zebras so that you know when you're setting up a shot that a person is in the range that you want them to be. Typically with this camera, once you get used to it, it's kind of hard to mess things up, which is nice. I'm going to set this back to false color, and I'm going to turn off on our monitor. Color bars just sends out bars to the monitors for calibration, and we will go down to our look. You can add any look you want in here through the memory stick that's in the camera, but I recommend just sticking with Arri 709 unless you have a professionally made LUT for a very specific reason for the project that you're working on. I would not load in any like creative LUTs that you've purchased unless you really know what you're doing and understand the implications it will have on your false color and on your zebras. There's some LUTs that will never show that you're clipping because they've squished the highlights down, so you could be clipping in the sensor if you have that LUT on. If you have monitoring based exposure tools on, it will never show a clip, but the sensor is clipping. The LUT is just kind of like interrupting that. So you can add one if you want. So like I have a black and white here. So I'm gonna import black and white. Oh, it's already in there. So I'll go to black and white. That's one where I think it might be okay. And this was made from the Arri 709 LUT and just turn down saturation. You can select what you want to go to each different monitor. So let's say I wanted log C to go to this monitor. Now we're looking in log C, or we can look at our look, or we can look at classic 709. In this case, classic 709 is pretty close to Arri 709, which is our look. So I'm going to turn back on the look. Rec 709 color space, you can choose 709 or 2020, and we will move on to system. Typically, you're not in this part of the menu too often. Sensor. Noise reduction is kind of cool. When you're in ProRes, you can select noise reduction, and it does a pretty great job. I typically leave this off. External sync is when you have multiple cameras connected together, and at this point, someone else is going to be hopping into the settings and setting this up for you. Genlock sync controls your time code in. Sometimes I genlock, and sometimes I just set the time code in here to jam sync. I kind of prefer genlock, but that's if you're typically rolling longer, much longer takes. Some sound mixers will put on genlock and some will just do jam sync. So again, that's when you may hand off the menu to somebody else for a minute. Fan mode, you have low noise or record low. There's a specific temperature that's recommended for each of these. Shutter unit, you can either select shutter angle or exposure time. So if you look over at the monitor, the shutter will change from an angle to time. I typically keep it on shutter angle, but there are times when you need to switch over to time. Power is a battery warning that lets you know when your battery hits a certain voltage. For the batteries that I use, 12.5 is the level that I want to be notified that a battery swap needs to happen. I know that I have like 5 to 6 minutes when that happens. The way that I set this up was to put a battery on the camera and let it go down to where the battery had like 8 to 10%. And I viewed here what voltage that was and then set this to that voltage. So when the battery had 10% left, I was seeing around 12.5 volts. So shows me that on screen. It just says low voltage. Lens mount settings is if your lens has data, system date and time. I'm not going to explain this one. Buttons and display. In anything digital, I'm always going night mode, including my phone, laptop, and this camera. But you can go daytime if you're a psycho. Button brightness controls these buttons here. I typically roll with them off, but they get pretty bright. And they also control the buttons on top of the camera. Camera access protocol is like an IP-based system that you can connect to the camera to control it with other tools outside of what is right here. And if you're doing that, I don't think that you need a description of what this part of the menu is. Network and Wi-Fi, though, you may need to know. So I have Wi-Fi power turned on. There's 2 antennas on the camera. The external antenna is right up here, and the purpose of being able to turn that off and on is just for safety. It's totally safe. It doesn't really matter. I keep it on all the time. This is where you set your password. By default, it's Arri, and you can select your channel here. To connect to the camera in your Wi-Fi network, it will say like Alexa Mini LF. Then there's a URL that you go to that is the same for every camera, but the only difference is the serial number is on the end. And in the info, later in the menu, you can see what that URL is, and we'll take a look at that in a minute. The Wi-Fi lets you control the camera from your phone. Arri has a new companion app that they came out with. It also connects via Wi-Fi, and you can control the camera from the phone or a computer, so it's super nice. And when you do it, it has the same exact menu as this, so you can like really access everything besides seeing a live feed of the video over the Wi-Fi connection. Update is where you update the camera. You download a software update package or a SUP and put it on the memory stick, and once it's in there, you can hit update camera. Reset electronic horizon will reset these numbers right here. Just make sure that you know the camera is perfectly level before you do that. I haven't reset this for 2 years. Language is English or Chinese. Setup. User setups is incredible. I can just click save here. This is the setup that the camera is set to right now. So every setting that's in here will be saved, leaving all the boxes checked. I'm going to confirm, and we see that setup right here. So I am going to go to a different setup that I saved for the Mercury lenses and just load that. All of the settings that we selected when we saved this file last time are on here, and we can just quickly go back to what we just had without having to change any settings, which is a major time saver. It even puts the ND back where you had it. You can export all of these setups to the USB stick that's in the camera so that you can utilize these setups on other cameras, which is great. So you get a camera that has been factory reset by the rental house, and you don't want to spend a bunch of time going through and setting up everything for what you know you already want. You've already saved it. It's saved on your computer. When you get the camera, you copy it over to the memory stick, and you're up and running in seconds. So in that case, you would select user setups on USB, and you would import them into the camera and then load them. User buttons is where you are mapping what all of these buttons do. So VF1 and VF2 are on the viewfinder. They're up here, and it's both of these functions are SDI check log C and SDI frame lines. So when I click VF2, our frame lines are turning on and off. And when I click VF1, we're checking our log C. And you can see 1 and 2 typically are ND up and down. I have 3 set to check log C. Button 4, I love this, SDI zoom. And you can see down here is where the SDI, where the zoom happens. So it's kind of in the middle of the screen. And you can see here, button 5 is my zoom position. So if I want to check something, I zoom in, and I can move around the window by hitting button 5. And I can come out like this. And in any of these buttons, if you long press it, it zooms in, and then I let go, and it comes out. So if I just want to hold the button once, I can just kind of long hold it instead of toggling it in. So it's nice that you can operate it in either way. And button 6, which I talked about before, is our exposure tool, which for here is false colors. And if you need to know about the false colors, there's a guide here. On the web app, there's 2 extra buttons. We have 6 right here, but we have 7 and 8 on the web app. And you can select all of the same features that you can select on any of the other buttons, which there's a lot. And you can kind of customize this to how you like it or how you need it for a certain project. We're in the buttons section, so there's a lot of other things that have buttons. This is for the WCU4 or the High 5. It's a wireless hand unit for pulling focus, but also could control the camera, and there's buttons that can be selected so the AC can control elements of the camera, like they could change the ND if they wanted from the hand unit. Same thing for these two. Anything that's connected through the L-bus, master grips, there's like a breakout box that can control the camera. That's where you select what those buttons on those devices control. A lot of buttons on a lot of different devices. You control all of that here and can really customize your experience. Metadata, you can type in anything you want for these, the production company, director. I just have my name in the cinematographer and fill out all of this info as needed. Sometimes I don't really fill it out at all. Electronic control system is the hand unit settings, so you can install lens tables and make sure that all of your motors and hand units are working properly. If you're within this part of the settings, I assume you know how to use the camera. Info, it tells you what software you're on. You can make sure that you are up to date. Your system info, like the camera hours, the sensor temperature on this camera should be 40 degrees Celsius, and your sensor temp state and your camera temp state, as long as those say okay, you're good. Your serial number is also needed for accessing the camera through Wi-Fi. Maximum frames per second shows what the card can do in the current configuration, which is the resolution and the codec. In this case, it's 40 frames a second. Media info, status is ready. Also, we can see that we're in standby, and just some information about the media. USB info, same thing. We can see that there's 7 frame lines, 7 licenses. On this camera, you don't need to buy additional licenses, but they're on there. And your look files, your setup files, and the updates, and the LDA files. Network info, this is where your URL will be. The numbers in there are the serial number to this camera. So if you go to this URL when you're connected to the Wi-Fi network, like we talked about before, you will see a web version of this whole entire menu that we've just gone through. It matches exactly, and you can control the camera from your phone or a computer. Lens info. This lens doesn't have data, so there's going to be no info here, but if you have lens with data like a Cook with eye technology or a Sigma with eye technology or any of the others, all this information will fill out. User button info, it just shows what the user buttons are. Export hardware info file is for obtaining licenses, and export log file is for if there's an issue with the camera, you can send it into the techs and they will take a look at that. And then export update log files is kind of just like a log file, but it's used if there's an error when you're updating the software on the camera. That's the file that you would send if your camera wasn't working after an update, or the update failed, or you lost power in the update. Alerts are if anything is going wrong. Alerts aren't necessarily a horrible thing. It's just will alert you if you think something's happening, like you think you have timecode in, but the box isn't there anymore. It will also show a indicator of that on this screen. But yeah, system state is good. On top of the viewfinder, there's a magnification button, which just zooms in like this. And there's a playback button. If you click it, it will say hold for playback, and you can go into the playback. So you can skip to other clips. You can go to your clip list. Some of these are grayed out because in certain formats that the camera is set to, it will not play back clips in other formats. So I believe that this clip that's grayed out here, C39, was Arri RAW, but we are in ProRes 422 HQ right now, so we'll only play back 422 HQs. These aren't very long clips, but when you click play, I'm scrolling this wheel back here, and you can get up to like 16 or 32 times playback, or you can just scroll by frame. And the last part of the playback menu is your options. What happens when the clip ends? You can play the next clip, pause, loop the clip, or just exit the playback. I have play next clip. And to get out of playback mode, you can just click close here or hold the play button. There's also a lock button on the viewfinder. So I engage the lock button so nothing I press works. Record doesn't work. No buttons work. Also, you can lock these buttons so nothing will work. I don't usually use that, but I imagine it comes in handy in certain scenarios. So I'm going to unlock this. You can also operate the camera by hitting function and then 1, and you can see up here and here that it's in the frames per second. And if I go down, it's moving across this top menu bar. And in a pinch, when I've like not had this on the camera and didn't want to connect through Wi-Fi, I have to like change the ISO or ND from here. So you click 3 to select it, and then I'm gonna go up and then hit select, and it will change the ND. So I'm gonna put the ND back on, and I can go to like the exposure index, for example, hit 3 to select, and then change my values here. And to get out of it, you hold function and then hold 1 again, and then you're out of it. Also, you can hold function to turn the Wi-Fi off. And that does it for the menu. The only other button that you need to worry about is the power button. It's back here. If you want to turn on the camera, you just hit it. This will come up on the screen. The fans will spin up and then reduce speed once powered on. And you will wait here before you record until your standby is on. And lastly, you don't need to eject the card before taking it out. You do want to obviously not take it out when the camera is rolling. If we roll on this and stop rolling, it immediately goes back into standby, which means you can immediately roll again, but you cannot take the card out until the red light on the back of the door changes back to green, and that takes about 3 seconds. So when you cut your last clip, wait till the red light turns to green, then you can take the card out. Green light on the back of the door, you're good to roll, and you're okay to take the card out. And if you want to turn off the camera, you can see you hold it for 5 seconds. If I were to let go, it wouldn't turn off. I hold it for 5 seconds. Now the camera's off. And we're done. That is everything you need to know to operate this camera from a menu standpoint. After watching that, you will literally be able to operate any Alexa. And as mentioned before, I will be getting into a lot more aspects of this camera, including why it was a great investment, and talk about the financial elements of it. We'll look at footage. I just think that this camera is the best camera in the world and best camera I ever used, and still the best camera that you could buy right now. I've had it for about 2 years and want to get into all the details about it, so stay tuned.